My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 32 years old, and the last thing I remember before waking up in a private hospital suite was my mother-in-law serving me a second helping of tiramisu. When I opened my eyes, harsh fluorescent lights glared overhead, and Forline was taped to my arm, and a heart monitor clicked steadily beside my bed. The door to the room was partially open, and through the narrow gap I heard Margaret whispering, "Are you sure she ate it?" Then Brooke, my sister-in-law, let out a soft laugh. "Relax, by tomorrow morning, everything will belong to us." A chill shot through my body. I reached toward the chair beside the bed where my purse had been left. My phone was inside. The battery showed 34%. I opened my messages and typed a single sentence to my attorney. "Execute the plan now." 48 hours earlier, I had signed paperwork that none of them knew existed. The woman who helped me prepare it was already on her way to the hospital. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to go back. Because what happened at that dinner table started long before the wine was poured. Welcome back to Heartwarming Tales, where every story is a reminder that silence is not weakness, it is strategy. If you have ever had to defend something you built from the very people who were supposed to support you, this story may feel painfully familiar. Leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. I grew up in Harnett County, North Carolina. My mother raised me by herself in a double-wide trailer, sitting on 2 acres of rented land owned by a soybean farmer. She worked overnight shifts at a gas station and spent her weekends at a church thrift store. We never had much, but I never went hungry. What I learned early in life was that nothing comes free, and nothing stays yours unless you hold on to it with both hands. I earned a scholarship to attend nursing school at UNC Wilmington. I graduated at the top of my class and accepted a position in the emergency department at Novant Health Presbyterian Medical Center in Charlotte. For 4 years, I worked there. And while still covering weekend shifts, I enrolled in the Family Nurse Practitioner program at UNC Charlotte. 2 years later, I earned my MSN, passed my certification boards, and became licensed to diagnose illnesses, prescribe medications, and create treatment plans independently. 12-hour shifts, holidays, overnights. I loved the work. But every week, I watched patients leave the hospital and return to homes where no one was waiting for them. Older men went back to empty apartments. Women recovering from surgery returned home with nobody checking whether they had eaten or taken their medications. The hospital treated emergencies. Nobody treated what came afterward. So I started Carter Home Care from my kitchen table. 1 laptop, 1 filing cabinet, and a phone that never seemed to stop ringing. Within 2 years, I had 6 employees. By 2023, we were serving 6 rural counties surrounding Charlotte, providing home nursing services, post-operative care, medication management, and physical therapy referrals. Every Saturday morning, I personally visited patients, not because I had to, because Mrs. Delano in Stanley County had no children, because Mr. Whitfield in Anson County couldn't pull on his compression stockings without assistance. The agency belonged to me. Every contract, every hire, every sleepless night spent balancing payroll. Mine. I was proud of it the way people are proud of something, built entirely through persistence and refusal to quit. I was excellent at taking care of others. I was terrible at recognizing when someone was quietly circling me. I met Nathan Holloway at a fundraiser supporting rural healthcare clinics in Cabarrus County. He was tall and reserved. He listened in a way that made you feel as though nobody else existed in the room. When he asked about my work and learned I owned a home healthcare agency, he didn't lose interest the way most people did. Instead, he asked how I handled Medicare reimbursement claims. That got my attention. We dated for 11 months. Nathan was kind, dependable, and never spoke over me. At the time, that felt like love. When he eventually introduced me to his family, I honestly believed I had won the lottery. The Holloway home sat on 3 acres inside a gated community just outside Mint Hill. Margaret greeted me at the front door with a hug that smelled faintly of Chanel perfume and freshly baked bread. She held my face gently between her hands and smiled. "You're exactly what this family needed." The dining table was set with heirloom china that had supposedly been passed down for generations. Margaret asked about my company, my mother, my future goals. Everything felt welcoming. Everything felt genuine. Everything felt like home. Across from me sat Brooke, Nathan's younger sister. She was polished from head to toe, perfect blowout, elegant blouse, flawless nails. She smiled and asked all the right questions, but her eyes studied me, noticed me, measured me. The way someone studies a room before deciding whether it's worth renting. I noticed it and quietly filed it away. During dinner, Nathan checked his phone twice. Both times the calls came from Margaret. Both times he answered immediately. I filed that away too. On the drive home, Nathan smiled and said, "Mom already loves you." I squeezed his hand. Looking back now, I understand that warmth wasn't affection. It was research. Margaret was evaluating me before I even realized I was being appraised. 6 months after our wedding, Margaret invited me to lunch. Just the two of us. We met at a bistro near South Park. One she loved because the manager knew her by name. She ordered for both of us. Halfway through the meal, she set down her fork and folded her hands neatly. "I've been thinking," she said. "Nathan and I have discussed something." I listened. "You know the family has the Holloway Family Trust. It manages our real estate investments, tax planning, and long-term assets. We think it might be wise to place your business under the trust as well, for protection, for efficiency." She presented it exactly the way she presented everything else, like a gift. I took a sip of water. "I appreciate the suggestion, Margaret, but Carter Home Care is my company. I built it before I married Nathan, and I'd rather keep it separate." Her smile never disappeared, but it stopped reaching her eyes. "Of course, dear. Just something to think about. The offer will always be there." That evening, Nathan brought it up while we were washing dishes. "Mom was only trying to help," he said. "She understands these things. Don't make it awkward." I dried a plate and placed it carefully in the cabinet. "I'm not making it awkward," I replied. I said no. He went quiet. That was the first time I felt it. The invisible cord connecting Nathan and Margaret. Whenever money became part of the conversation, that cord tightened. It was subtle, almost impossible to see. But every time I pushed against it, Nathan leaned toward her. I let it go that night. I shouldn't have, but I had a teen patient schedule the next morning, and I chose the problem I knew how to solve instead of the one I couldn't yet name. That summer, the entire family gathered at the Holloway house for a 4th of July barbecue. Brisket smoked in the backyard. Country pop music blasted from Brooke's Bluetooth speaker. Brooke arrived in a brand new SUV. Later, I learned it was leased. She spent most of the afternoon talking about a new business idea. Event planning, she announced proudly. I have a natural eye for it. Margaret practically glowed. Brooke has wonderful taste. I offered genuine support. I know several venue managers. If you ever need introductions, I'd be happy to help. Brooke's smile tightened. Thanks, I think I've got it handled. A little later, I went inside to grab ice. The laundry room door was slightly open. Brooke was on the phone. I heard her before she noticed me. She acts like she's the only person who works, Brooke complained. Try building something when your own mother never stops comparing you to the perfect daughter-in-law. I froze. The ice bucket hung loosely in my hand. Quietly, I set it down and walked back outside. The words stung, but I understood them. Brooke had already launched two separate businesses using Margaret's money, and both had collapsed within 18 months. I had built one company with no financial backing, no wealthy relatives, and no safety net, and it was thriving. That kind of comparison would make almost anyone resentful. But the part that stayed with me wasn't Brooke's jealousy. It was what she had said about Margaret constantly comparing us. That was when I started seeing the pattern. Margaret didn't simply want my business. She had created an entire system. She praised me to Brooke. She praised Brooke to Nathan. She held the measuring stick. And the rest of us spent so much time trying to earn her approval that we never stopped to notice what was really happening. We were all being evaluated by the same person for the same reason: control. The first transfer was $12,000. I found it while balancing our joint checking account on a Tuesday evening. $12,000 had been wired to an account number I didn't recognize. I showed Nathan the statement. He barely glanced at it. Mom needed it for a property closing, he said casually. Just a short-term bridge loan. She pay it back. I slowly placed the paper on the table. That's our emergency fund, Nathan. He shrugged. It's temporary. Don't turn this into a big issue. I tried to establish a boundary. From now on, I said, no money leaves our joint account unless we both agree first. He nodded. Fair enough. 2 weeks later, another $5,000 disappeared. Same account, same destination. No conversation, no warning. When I confronted him, he simply said, Margaret had been dealing with a tight deadline and he hadn't wanted to bother me while I was working. As though asking permission before spending my money was somehow an inconvenience. That weekend I opened a personal account at another bank. I transferred my business income there, changed my direct deposits, left only enough money in the joint account to cover household expenses. Nathan didn't notice for nearly 3 weeks. When he finally did, he looked confused. Why would you do that? Because I work 60 hours a week for that money, I answered. And I deserve to know where it goes. He fell silent. I felt that invisible cord tighten again. This time I didn't release it. I started building walls he couldn't see. That was the first one. It wouldn't be the last. I buried myself in work. It was easier than sitting across from Nathan and wondering who I had actually married. Around that time, a major opportunity landed on my desk. A regional hospital wanted Carter home care to manage its post-discharge program across 3 counties. It was the biggest contract I had ever secured. I hired 3 additional nurses, purchased a second company vehicle. Most nights I stayed at the office until 9 o'clock. The workload consumed me. I even missed Nathan's birthday dinner, which Margaret had organized. I called to apologize. Margaret answered Nathan's phone. Oh, we understand, sweetheart, she said. Business comes first for some people. She spoke softly, almost affectionately, like someone patting a child on the head. Nathan never returned my call that night. When I got home, he was asleep on the couch with the television still glowing in the background. I stood in the doorway for a long time. There was a version of this story where I sat beside him and told him everything. The money, the boundaries, his mother, the growing distance between us, all of it. But I was exhausted. I even complimented her. Margaret smiled warmly and squeezed my hand across the table. That night, shortly after midnight, I woke up violently sick. Not mild nausea, not ordinary food poisoning, violent vomiting. My heart raced. My skin felt cold and clammy. The room tilted every time I stood up. Nathan rushed me to urgent care. The physician examined me, ordered basic labs, and eventually concluded it was probably viral gastroenteritis, a standard stomach bug, he said. Get plenty of fluids, rest, come back if symptoms worsen. I looked directly at him. Could it have been something I ate? Something that shouldn't have been in the food? He tilted his head. Possible, but unlikely. Usually others would become ill too. Nobody else got sick. Only me. I went home. slept nearly 14 hours, spent 3 days recovering. On the second day, I wrote everything down. Date, October 6th. Location, Holloway residence. Meal consumed, roast beef, green beans, mushroom risotto. Quantity, 2 servings. Prepared by Margaret Holloway. Others present, Nathan, Brooke, Margaret. Reported illnesses, none. I folded the note and placed it inside a drawer at my office. At the time, I didn't know exactly why. I only knew something about the situation bothered me. Deep in the back of my mind, a different part of me was paying attention. The emergency room nurse I used to be. The one who had spent years listening to patients' stories that didn't match their symptoms. The one who knew that sometimes the details people ignored were the details that mattered most. That part of me wasn't convinced this was a coincidence, and it wasn't ready to stop watching. Send part 3 and I'll continue with the same character names, tone, and full-length rewriting style. Nathan told me Margaret felt absolutely awful about what had happened. According to him, she had gone back through every ingredient she used and checked them 3 different times. He said it so naturally, so smoothly, that it sounded rehearsed. 2 weeks later, I was fully recovered. I was back at the office, back to weekend patient visits, back to my normal routine. Everything felt normal again. Except Nathan. Nathan started asking questions he had never asked in 3 years of marriage. One evening, while I was reviewing reports on my laptop, he sat down beside me. "How exactly does your business account work?" he asked. I looked up. "What do you mean? Is it only in your name?" I frowned. "Why?" He shrugged. "Just curious. Estate planning and all that. Mom says married couples should understand each other's finances better. Your mother said that. She's right, though." He smiled. "We should know these things." I didn't answer. Instead, I changed the subject and started talking about the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom. That night, after Nathan fell asleep, I opened my LLC operating agreement and started reading. Every page, every clause, every signature. The succession section was standard language from when I first incorporated the company. If I became incapacitated, Nathan, as my spouse, would automatically become interim manager with authority over business operations. At the time I signed it, the clause had seemed completely harmless. That was 2 years earlier, before the missing money, before the property liens, before the mushroom risotto. Now it looked less like a legal safeguard and more like an unlocked door. I pulled up my estate planning documents next. When Nathan and I got married, I had signed a healthcare power of attorney naming him as my healthcare agent. Attached behind it was a durable financial power of attorney. If I became incapacitated, Nathan would gain broad authority over my finances, assets, and accounts. My chest tightened. I wasn't naturally suspicious. I was a nurse practitioner. My entire career revolved around gathering evidence and following facts. And the facts were beginning to point somewhere. I desperately wished they weren't. I opened a new document on my computer and started drafting revisions to my succession plan. It was after midnight. Nathan snored softly beside me. I typed quietly in the dark. Let me pause here for a moment, because I know exactly what some of you are thinking. Why didn't she just leave? Trust me. I asked myself that same question every single day. But walking away without proof meant leaving my business vulnerable. It meant exposing everything I had spent years building. If you've ever been caught between running away and standing your ground, then you know what that paralysis feels like. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. A few days later, Nathan's work bag sat on the hallway bench exactly where he always left it. Brown leather, scuffed corners. Nothing unusual. I was looking for a phone charger he had borrowed earlier in the week. When I unzipped the front compartment, my hand brushed against a manila folder. I pulled it out. Inside was a document. Healthcare power of attorney. My name appeared at the top. Nathan Holloway was listed as my healthcare agent with broad decision-making authority, including financial authority in the event of my incapacitation. The document was dated 7 months earlier, and at the bottom was my signature. Except it wasn't. I had never seen the document before, and I had certainly never signed it. I stood frozen in the hallway. The house was silent. Nathan was spending the evening at Margaret's home. The only sound came from the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Carefully, I turned each page. The document had been notarized. The notary's name meant nothing to me. Janet Faulkner, Notary Public, Mecklenburg County. I immediately pulled out my phone and photographed everything. Every page, every seal, every signature. Then I studied the handwriting. The forged signature looked convincing at first glance, but I had signed my name thousands of times. Business contracts, insurance forms, licensing paperwork, medical records. I knew my own signature the way a musician knows a favorite song. This wasn't mine. Not even close. After taking the photos, I placed every page back in order, returned the folder to the pocket, closed the zipper, and left the bag exactly where I found it. That night I lay beside Nathan in bed. He slept peacefully, one arm draped across his pillow, breathing slow and steady. I stared at the ceiling. The man I had married was carrying a document capable of giving him control over everything I owned, and it bore my name written in somebody else's hand. Nora Bennett had been one of my closest friends since my emergency room days. She worked as a pharmacist at the same hospital where I used to work. Sharp, direct, the kind of friend who would tell you your outfit looked terrible and then spend an hour helping you find a better one. We met for coffee on a Wednesday morning near Central Avenue. She stirred her latte and looked at me with the same expression she used whenever she was about to deliver bad news. "Eve, I need to ask you something." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Last week somebody called the pharmacy asking about your medical history." I blinked. "What?" "They claimed they were calling from your primary care physician's office. Said they were verifying medications for a hospital pre-admission workup." I slowly lowered my coffee cup. "I don't have a hospital pre-admission workup." "I know." She leaned forward. "The callback number they left didn't match your doctor's office. I flagged it under HIPAA procedures and reported it to my supervisor." My hands stayed steady. My stomach didn't. What exactly were they asking for? Medication history, allergies, prescription records. She hesitated. "And one more thing." "What?" "They specifically asked whether you had a history of psychiatric treatment or cognitive impairment." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I told her everything. The illness after dinner, Nathan's sudden interest in my finances, the forged power of attorney, all of it. Nora listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, she set both hands flat on the table. "Evelyn, you need a lawyer." I nodded. "Not the Holloway family attorney. Not someone Nathan recommends. Your own attorney. Someone who owes nothing to anyone in that family." She paused. "And if you honestly think you were poisoned, and I think you should seriously consider that possibility. You need baseline blood work done immediately." I looked at her. "Why?" "So if it happens again, you'll have something to compare it to." The next morning, I contacted the North Carolina State Bar Referral Service and requested an attorney specializing in trust litigation, estate disputes, and asset protection. They provided 3 names. I chose Rachel Keller. Her firm was small, independent, and completely disconnected from Charlotte's real estate circles. Her office occupied the second floor of a modest brick building on East Boulevard. No mahogany furniture, no expensive paintings, just clean walls and practical furniture. I liked her immediately. Rachel listened to me for 45 uninterrupted minutes. When I finished, she calmly set down her pen. "You have evidence of forgery. She counted on her fingers a pattern of financial violations, unauthorized attempts to access your medical information, and based on everything you've described, a very limited window before things escalate. She pulled a legal pad toward her. Here's what I recommend. I listen carefully. First, we restructure your trust immediately. Nathan comes off as beneficiary and successor trustee. If you're incapacitated, I'd become interim trustee. I nodded. Second, we modify your business succession plan. Nathan is removed as emergency manager. I replace him. She continued writing. Third, we pre-file a challenge against the forged power of attorney with the Mecklenburg County clerk. If anyone attempts to use it in court or at a hospital, the challenge is already on record. Then she looked up. Fourth, and this is important, we establish a dead man's switch. I frowned. What does that mean? You check in with me at predetermined times. If you miss a check-in and I can't reach you, I automatically activate a prepared legal package. What kind of package? Restraining orders, police reports, asset freezes, emergency divorce filings. She folded her hands. Everything drafted in advance. Everything ready to go. I signed every document that afternoon. I didn't feel powerful. I felt prepared. Sometimes that's the same thing. A few days later, Nathan left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he showered upstairs. A notification appeared. An email. Normally, I would have ignored it. This time, I didn't. The subject line read, Emergency conservatorship timeline. My pulse slowed. The email was from Margaret. It was addressed to an attorney named Richard Mercer. The contents outlined a detailed plan. Step 1. After he is admitted to hospital and presents healthcare POA to admissions. Step 2. File emergency. Temporary conservatorship citing medical incapacity. Judge Harwell's clerk confirms Thursday availability. Step 3. Upon approval, redirect business and personal assets into the hallway. Family trust within 48 hours. Step 4. Secure operational control of Carter. Home care through interim management clause. I read the email twice. My hands never shook. Something inside me became very still. The same stillness I used to feel in the emergency room when a trauma patient arrived. Everything narrowed. Everything sharpened. They had a lawyer, a judge, a timeline, a complete plan. They intended to declare me incapacitated and strip away everything I had built. While I lay helpless in a hospital bed, I took screenshots, emailed them to Rachel from my personal account. Then I closed the laptop, wiped the screen. For the first time, fear appeared on Margaret's face. Not panic, fear. The kind that arrives when a plan stops being theoretical and starts becoming evidence. Ethan finally spoke. What substance? Rebecca read directly from the report. Zolpidem. The room seemed to shrink. Elena watched Ethan's expression collapse because, unlike everyone else in the room, he knew exactly what that meant. Someone had drugged her. Not accidentally. Not maybe. Not potentially. Actually. His eyes moved slowly toward his mother. Margaret immediately shook her head. No. It came out too quickly. Too defensively. No, that's impossible. Rebecca closed the folder. That's interesting. Margaret blinked. What? You knew exactly which result I was referring to before I finished speaking. Nobody said a word. The silence was devastating. A knock interrupted the moment. The door opened. Two uniformed officers stepped inside. Behind them was a woman in a dark business suit carrying a leather case. Rebecca stood. Perfect timing. She gestured toward the newcomer. This is Denise Mercer from the State Bureau of Investigations, Financial Crimes Division. Margaret's color drained. Vanessa whispered, "Oh my God." Denise placed her case on the table and opened it. Inside were printed emails, bank records, property documents, court filings, months of paper. Months of lies. Denise looked directly at Margaret. We executed preservation orders this morning. Margaret swallowed. What does that mean? It means nobody gets to destroy evidence. The investigator removed the first document, a copy of the email Elena had found on Ethan's laptop. Emergency conservatorship timeline. Step by step. Every instruction. Every planned move. Every attempt to seize Elena's assets. Denise laid it flat on the table. Would you like to explain this? Margaret stared at the page. She didn't answer. Denise turned to Ethan. Mr. Cole? Ethan looked broken. He looked like a man seeing his life from the outside for the first time. His voice cracked. I thought ... Nobody helped him finish because there was nothing to finish. Rebecca spoke quietly. Did you know the power of attorney was forged? Ethan closed his eyes. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he nodded. Once, a tiny movement, but enough. Vanessa gasped. Margaret's head whipped around. Ethan. He didn't look at her. Ethan. Still nothing. Then he spoke. I knew. The words landed like a hammer. Elena felt something strange. Not satisfaction. Not victory. Relief. Months of doubt. Months of wondering whether she was imagining things. Months of questioning her own instincts. Gone. Because the truth was finally standing in the open. Ethan rubbed his face. I didn't create it. Margaret's jaw tightened. But I knew. The investigator made a note. Rebecca made another. The officers exchanged glances. And Margaret realized something that had never happened before. Nobody in the room was listening to her anymore. Mr. Sinclair, Olivia Hart cut in calmly. Your signature appears on the forged. POA, that makes you potentially liable for conspiracy to commit fraud. I strongly advise you to retain separate legal counsel before making further statements. Daniel put his head in his hands. Margaret stood. She straightened the way she always did, spine aligned. Chin lifted, the posture of a woman who had run the Sinclair name like a business for 3 decades. She looked at me the way she had the first night we met, but without warmth, without performance, just calculation. After everything this family did for you, she said, voice controlled but brittle. After we welcomed you into this home, after we gave you the Sinclair name, after Daniel chose you, this is how you repay us. The room waited. Chloe was crying quietly on the couch. Daniel had not moved. Olivia Hart held her pen above her legal pad, still unread. I looked at Margaret from the hospital bed, 4 in my arm. Monitor tracking my heart, hair pulled back. Eyes steady. I did not stand. I did not raise my voice. I did not list the forged documents. I did not list the stolen money. I did not list the poison. I only said, family does not poison family, Margaret. Silence dropped like a weight. The monitor beeped once, twice. Margaret opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She closed it, opened it again. Still nothing. 30 years of controlling conversations, and she had no answer for that. Olivia Hart spoke into the silence. I recommend you retain separate legal counsel immediately. Mrs. Sinclair, law enforcement will want to speak with you today. Margaret turned. She picked up her purse. She did not look at Chloe. She did not look at Daniel. She walked out of the room without looking back. Chloe followed, wiping her face with her sleeve. Daniel was last. He paused at the door. Elena, I'm sorry. I didn't. I know, I said quietly. That's the problem. Within the hour, 2 officers from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department arrived at the hospital. Olivia Hart met them in the hallway and Kai briefed them before they entered my room. She handed over the package. Copies of the forged PIA and pre-filed challenge. Screenshots of Margaret Sinclair's conservatorship emailed to Harold Brewer. My documented account of the 2:07 a.m. hallway conversation. Baseline blood work from 2 weeks prior. Hospital admission records. I gave my statement the way I had been trained to give patient reports. Facts. Timeline, no emotion. The taller officer asked if I wanted to press charges. Yes. At 10 a.m., the toxicology results came back. The attending physician entered my room, chart in hand. Miss Carter, your panel flagged an elevated level of a benzodiazepine, compound sedative hypnotic, not prescribed to you, and not consistent with any medication in your records. The concentration is consistent with oral ingestion approximately 8 to 12 hours before your blood was drawn. Thank you, I said. He looked at the officers. Understood without being told, then left to finalize the report. Security confirmed the Sinclairs had already left the hospital. Olivia Hart said they won't be hard to find. Margaret Sinclair was arrested the following afternoon. Charge: assault by administering a noxious substance. Additional charges followed: forgery of a legal instrument, conspiracy to commit financial fraud, attempted financial exploitation. Chloe was charged as an accessory. She cooperated immediately. Daniel also cooperated, providing financial records, signatures, and testimony. His charges were reduced to financial document fraud. No jail time, but a felony record. The restraining order became permanent. I filed for divorce the same week I was discharged. It was finalized in 4 months. I kept everything: my business, my accounts, my trust, my home. None of it had ever been in Daniel's name. None of it had ever touched the Sinclair family trust. The Sinclair house went to auction. Commercial properties were liquidated. Debt consumed the rest. 6 months later, I sat at my desk at Elena Carter Home Health and signed a contract with a second regional hospital. My scheduler poked her head in. A patient from Union County sent flowers. Note says, "Thank you for the nurse who made sure I took my medication." I placed it in my drawer beside Mrs. Delano's. I changed the locks on my townhouse, planted tomatoes in the back garden, adopted a gray cat from the county, Shelter who slept on my filing cabinet, and purred at the printer. Dr. Maya Bennett came by on Saturdays. We drank coffee and talked about everything except hospitals and lawyers. Olivia Hart sent a card when the divorce was finalized. It was a privilege to work with someone who trusted the process. I drove back to Harnett County one Sunday and sat on my mother's porch. She didn't ask about Daniel or Margaret or the trial. She just rocked in her chair and said, "You always were the quiet one. The quiet ones are always the ones paying attention." I sat beside her. Cicadas loud. Air warm with pine. I was not the same woman who drove to that house in October. Not harder, not angrier, just clearer about what I protect and what I will never confuse for family again, because I learned something I will never forget. The people who say we are family the loudest are sometimes the ones who require the strongest boundaries. That is my story. One forged signature, one dinner I walked into with my eyes open, and one message that changed everything. If this reminded you to check who has power of attorney over your healthcare or to review your trust ticket seriously, and if someone else needs to hear it, share it with them. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one. Please like and subscribe my channel Heartwarming Tales.